Jim Phillips, ACC commissioner, had some interesting comments this past week about the future of the conference's biggest game. The ACC championship game takes place in Charlotte, North Carolina, Carolina Panther Stadium every single year. And he had some interesting comments for what seemed to be him brainstorming during an interview. I don't know really what you call it. It was bizarre, to say the least, with some of his comments that he was floating out there. I joked that I guess the ACC championship game is canceled. We're just going to have a regular season champion and a quote unquote playoff / tournament champion, according to Jim Phillips. But again, this is something that he's going to have to float out there to all the head coaches of the ACC programs. He basically said that he was contemplating having a regular season conference champion. So whoever has the best conference record in the ACC, they would get a bye during conference championship week. And then the teams 2 and 3 in the conference would play. But would play for what is my question. There's no guarantee on any given season that Clemson's going to get the ACC is going to get 2 teams into the college football playoffs. So what are you really doing there? I don't know. We'll talk about it in a minute. His other thought was that take the top 4 teams and they play on the final Saturday of the regular season, aka rivalry weekend. You would play 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, and then the winners of each of those games would play in Charlotte for the ACC championship game the following weekend. Obviously, he's got to float this out to the head coaches to get feedback on it. And his quote was, "The conference championship games are important as long as we make them important." Jordan, your thoughts?
Yeah. It was interesting. I get kind of the rationale behind a potential change. I know there was, because there was concern, with, this season with SMU that, the fact that, they would have been better off. They could have been better off potentially being better off not having played in the ACC championship game. Right. I get the concern, but I don't think I don't think that would be a good idea.
It's just like, it only makes sense if you're guaranteed 2 spots, right?
Yeah.
Because in that format, if you're guaranteed 2 spots, you would assume, my regular season conference champion is going to be in the playoffs. So we're going to give them a bye. And then 2 and 3 are basically duking it out for a playoff berth at that point. Yeah. But in the current format, that's not guaranteed. So what would 2 and 3 be playing for? In some years, they'd be playing for, I guess the conference championship. But then are they really conference champions because the first team got a bye and's not playing I don't know. It's just weird to me, man. It's weird, a really weird format.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not vibing with it. But I don't think there's really anything that you can do about that. Ultimately, the hope is that, thankfully the committee did the right thing this year and didn't punish SMU for losing by 3 points in their conference championship game.
Right.
I hope that continues to be the precedent. The precedent that was set, seems to me like, hey, okay, if you are in a position where you can get 2 teams in, that second team that lost that game wouldn't be punished necessarily, especially since they didn't get blown out. I understand, hey, if you show up in your conference championship game and you look terrible, I do think that should count against you to a degree. But obviously it's a case by case thing, and what are the teams around them? What did they do? But ultimately, I think that if SMU had been left out, I would have understood I would have understood talking, at least discussing a change to the format, because you don't want to punish your first place team by potentially costing your first place team a spot in a playoff because they lost their conference championship game. But that's not what happened. So I don't understand that from that perspective. And if you're playing during rivalry week, that opens up into a whole nother can of worms.
So what are we doing with the rivalry
as far as scheduling? So I don't think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do with rivalry games at that point? You got Georgia Tech, Clemson, South Carolina, Louisville, Kentucky, Florida State, Florida, right? Like, I mean, what are we doing? If any of those teams play, there's going to be a problem, and those teams aren't going to be interested in giving up their rivalry games. So I don't know, man. It just seems like, to me, it would have been better if Jim Phillips would have just came out and said we're exploring options going forward for the ACC championship game, in the new climate, of the 12-team playoff and college football, right? Like, but it seems like he just came out there and was like brainstorming to the media about possible avenues or courses of action going forward for the ACC and what they might do with their championship game. It just seems weird. It comes off as you don't know what you're doing. It comes off as you're kind of a joke, like you're kind of laughable.
Yeah, nobody else is doing that.
No, never hear Greg Sankey come out and say anything like that. If he came out and made it like, it would be an announcement like, hey, this is what the SEC is going to do going forward when it comes to our conference championship game. It wouldn't be like, hey, well, I was thinking we might do this. And then, I had another thought that, we're going to, maybe look at this. And like, man, what are you doing? Like, the ACC already gets enough hate for the weak conference that it quote unquote is. And, this, that, and the other. And when you got a leader like that goes out there and just says stuff like that, it just makes it so much worse, man. Like, I'm so sick of seeing stuff like this happen in the ACC. It's whatever. It is.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this isn't anything new. For those of you that have, that know the history of the ACC and its leadership, they have been fighting a 60+ year long PR battle. So like it really is like at least in the sport of football, and now they're fighting it in basketball too, which shows you kind of the direction things are heading. So like it's that's just the reality of this conference right now, and a part of the reason why Clemson and Florida State are suing to get out. So it is what it is.
It is. It is what it is, man.